We're going to be looking at 10 cheap players that you can get in trades or off the waiver wire to help you build your teams. These are players you can plan attack around for week 1 or look to in the future on the waiver wire or possibly as a cheap trade target for long-term upside. But before we dig into these players, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Stop missing out on this information because we're looking at the waiver wire every week. We're looking at trade scenarios. We're looking at cheap players. We're looking at ways to set your lineups, giving you ideas just to help you out. Hit that button. Stop missing out. But let's go ahead. Let's look at these 10 players and see what we can get into here. But our first guy is Rashard Bateman, wide receiver, 47 in ADP. He's coming back from a Liz Frank injury, and he has not been on the field much over the course of his career, but when he's on the field, he's pretty efficient, and we've seen him have a couple pop-off games, but it really hasn't been put together yet. So he's been faded in ADP. He's been faded in value. Super cheap. And one thing about this Ravens offense is any given week, Mark Andrews will own a 20 to 40% share of the targets. That is huge for the passing offense because that leaves little on the bone for the receivers to eat. On top of this is a slow volume passing offense as it is in its own nature. We got Todd Monken now calling the offense, so things should be a little faster paced, should be a little bit more plays ran, but you want to see how that's going to happen. There's two scenarios you can look at here. Rashard Bateman's a cheap get right now due to him being a very talented wide receiver, and he could be even a cheaper get later down the road. Say this offense starts a little bit slow, or it's a Mark Andrews game to start out with, and they run it a little bit, and the wide receivers just give you ho-hum production. You might catch them dirt cheap, and then you just play the matchups with them, and you got a good wide receiver on the back end of your roster. There's a chance that he starts it off slow due to him coming back to the Liz Frank, and they're just taking it slow with him. I don't see that happening due to what we've seen in training camp, but that could be a thing. There could be a slow start. I see him being on the field doing some things. Zay Flowers and Odell Beckham could be owning a larger target share than what we thought initially. That could slow him down. But the thing about Rashard Bateman, coming out of college, coming out of Minnesota, he was one of the top wide receiver prospects in that draft. Looked good, good ball skills, good route runner, very talented, polished wide receiver. If he was priced more like wide receiver 30, wide receiver 40, wide receiver 35, I would be scared due to the nature of the offense, him coming back from an injury. The thing is, in home leagues and redraft, we got him at wide receiver 47 and underdog ADP. That means he's a little cheaper than that. That means he's very obtainable. That means he's an upside player just due to the nature of his talents, which is something you may want to look at. You may not be able to fit him on your roster right now. You may not be able to trade for him really right now because your roster is pretty much set because you just drafted. But he's a player to look at week 2, week 3, week 4. If the price gets cheaper and he's on the field healthy, that just means you can just buy him cheaper and just see what happens. He might even end up on waivers. If this team starts off slow, if they target other players in the offense, but we want to look at the routes ran. We want to look at the snaps. If he's running lots of routes, he's going to eventually get opportunity, and we'll have update videos on Rashard Bateman throughout the year. Next, Ezekiel Elliott, RB49 and ADP. Very, very, very good in pass protection, and he is a player you can rely on at the NFL level to make things right in your offense, which means he should be on the field, and they got rid of Pierre Strong, and it's him and Ramondre Stevenson. Ramondre Stevenson, I'm not worried about. This isn't even about him. He's a good player. Draft him at ADP. Do what you want with him. But the thing about this, the price tag is free for Ezekiel Elliott, and he should get some moments. He did not look like the old Ezekiel Elliott these last few years, but we really just need volume. And we chase volume with running backs anyways, and he should be on the field. He should be getting some workload. Damian Harris is gone. That's 200 snaps away. That could go to Elliott, or maybe 150, 160, 120, something like that. And say if something happens to Ramondre Stevenson, Ezekiel Elliott's carrying the workload. So he's a running back that you can count on the back end of your roster. Is the upside grand? Not really, because I can't really fathom how he's going to give you many like RB1 weeks that are top end, but he is a guy that could give you consistent production and make you feel good if you don't want to wait on a young player to earn opportunity, get opportunity via injury or whatever. Ezekiel Elliott could be a guy you have on the back end of the roster because you already know what he's about. Now we're going to Trailon Burks, wide receiver 40 in ADP. He's coming back from an injury. We have to see what that looks like. But that just makes him cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And we're looking at cheap, talented players. Drafted in the first round. Has good size, adjusted athleticism. A lot cheaper compared to last year. We do have DeAndre Hopkins in the offense. He's the wide receiver 1. Hopkins is the wide receiver 1. There's no debate to that. 4th worst in the league in pace of play last year because they like to run the football. They have Derrick Henry. You should be running the football with that. Burks had 17% target share last year and 28% share of the air yards. With how slow the offense is, that's not great. That's not amazing, but it's okay, and it's something to hang your hat on as a rookie. The thing is, if something happens to this offense, something happens to Henry, they may be throwing it more. Burks is talented. He's going to be facing softer coverage because you're going to have to roll coverage to Hopkins. There might be some game scripts where he pops off, so he's a player that you're playing the matchups with, and he has talents because the Titans said they had talent. They traded away A.J. Brown and picked up Burks. Someone else would have drafted him in the first round anyways if they didn't, because he is a good wide receiver. Look at his college tape. Look at that game versus Alabama. There's ways he can win at the NFL level. The odds of him hitting aren't that great. It's not like I'm saying, hey, go get him. I'm saying, hey, this is an idea here. But the thing is, you do not want to invest into a wide receiver 2 on a slow-paced offense. However, if circumstances change and the volume picks up, you may want to look at Burks. If you're setting up DFS lineups and you want a cheap guy that could hit randomly while you load up the rest of your lineup with higher priced guys, Burks might be a guy to look at. He's coming back from injury. Things might start off slow. He might end up on waivers if he's not already in your league. So that's something to think of there. Look for him in the future maybe. Watch this offense. If something happens to Henry and you're thinking backup, also think of Burks because they may increase the passing. Next, Jamison Williams, wide receiver 56 in ADP. He's suspended. You're not going to get him for the first 6 games of the season, which makes him super cheap. But if he wasn't suspended, everybody would be drafting him in the middle rounds of this year's draft. He's got elite speed, and I feel like the upside's grand from game to game, and the bust side is grand from game to game. And I feel like we're going to get a little bit of that Will Fuller effect from him over the course of his career because he is a deep ball specialist. He can take the top off the defense. All you have to do is connect 1 or 2 of those passes, and you got a huge week. So he's a player that you have on the back of your roster and you gamble with. Say you got a bunch of bye weeks. Say he's in a juicy matchup. Chiefs this week, if he was on the field, you'd be playing him. You'd be wanting to. You'd be gambling with him. A guy in DFS, people are going to be throwing in lineups once he's back because he's going to be cheap and he's going to be getting air yards. You want to chase wide receivers with air yards who are cheap, and if you have extra flex spots, if you got a extra spot on your bench, he's a guy you want to look at. And if he's on waivers right now, come week 4, week 5, everyone's going to be talking about him, including me, as you should be picking him up because he's a wait and see what happens type of player. You have to understand, he's highly bust and he's highly boom from week to week. If you can't manage that, you do not want to touch an asset like this. You might want to find something else because you might start him on the bust weeks. You might start him on boom weeks, and you're going to not know what to do, and then you're going to confuse yourself and drop them or do something you don't need to do when you could be having another player that could be helping you out. Next, Jaden Reed, wide receiver 71 in ADP. There's 239 vacated targets in this offense. Aaron Rodgers is gone, though. They may slow down the pace. The passing game might slow down a little bit because they do have 2 good running backs, and Love's still transitioning to the NFL game as a starter. But Reed is talented. Got drafted in the 2nd round of this year's draft, so we got draft capital on his side. Top 50 player. Broke out with 2 different collegiate programs, Western Michigan and Michigan State. That tells us that he can go from one level of play, high school level, go to the college game, and just seamlessly transition to that level of play. And then go from the G5 level, the group of 5, to the Power 5 level at Michigan State, and then make that transition. Now we're making the transition to the NFL level. He's already working with the starters. He's already getting slot snaps. Looks like he's going to be running a lot of routes. Looks like he's going to be getting a lot of opportunity. He's on your waiver wire. Watch the Packers. You might be running to him after this week to get him on your team. You better pay attention to him. If you're in a deeper league, you might already have him, or you may want to think about getting him now just to see what happens as a lottery ticket. Next, Zay Jones, wide receiver 58 in ADP. If you need a stable wide receiver that's dirt cheap, this is your guy. He's going to be on the field for the Jaguars. The Jaguars move the ball. They're explosive. They got a good quarterback in Trevor Lawrence. Last year is wide receiver 31 in points per game. That doesn't sound great, but you're getting him at wide receiver 60 price tag. Calvin Ridley's there. He's going to soak up target share. But Zay Jones has a rapport with Trevor Lawrence, 12th in red zone targets, 17th in receptions. So he's going to give you something week to week. A guy that can really fill the gaps as injuries happen, as bye weeks happen, as you get holes through your wall throughout the season. You're going to need that joint compound to fix things up. That's going to be Zay Jones. And if you have him on the back end of your roster, you got a trusty veteran who could give you some production and plus matchups, who could help you out in the back end of your roster. And he's not a rookie for some of those who do not want to wait on younger players. Now we're looking at Zamir White, RB55 and ADP. Josh Jacobs is not a potential holdout anymore. He is signed. He's going to be the guy. But prior, a couple years ago, the injury history was huge with Josh Jacobs. That could always creep back up. Also, running backs, they tend to get injured pretty frequently. That's the thing. And you want top-tier handcuffs. Zamir White, 96th percentile speed score. If he gets the opportunity for a large workload anywhere throughout the year, he could pop off and could be the guy. He's known as Zeus from Georgia, high-end high school recruit everybody was clamoring for. Had some injuries, but still was productive at Georgia. Went in the 4th round to the Raiders. Could be a guy that sneaks up on us. Should be a guy you monitor throughout the year. Last but not least, I got you a cheap tight end here, Irv Smith. Tight end 18 in ADP. Should be on waivers. Watch him this weekend. See how many targets he gets. See how many routes he runs. See how much opportunity he gets, because he was a big get for the Bengals. Not many people are talking about him, but in red zone situations, he might be getting some opportunity. And if he's on your team, you're starting him here and there. The thing is, his down weeks might not be too bad, because there's not much difference between the tight end 25 and the tight end 12 in scoring. Usually about 4 or 5 points between weeks. From week to week, there's not much of a difference there. And there's really not much difference between like the tight end 8 to the tight end 25. If you really look at the scoring from week to weeks, from years past, that's usually how the tight end position runs. So if you're fading tight end, you're streaming tight end, look at Irv Smith, because he's going to be a cheap get. But those are 10 players that you can get right now, who you can trade for, who you can pick up off waivers, who you can watch and get off waivers later in the year, or trade for at even cheaper later in the year. We're looking at all things strategy here, not just the waiver wire, not just trades now, but how are things going to look like 2 to 3 weeks from now? We want to be prepared. We want to be ready. This is one way to do so. Just get a batch of players and just look through at things that could happen and just plan the attack. And if it doesn't happen, guess what? We're going to go over more players and we'll be even more ready and we'll be good to go. But let me know what you think in the comments below. I want to hear about it. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Catch you on the next video.